First of all, just a couple of comments on what's happening in the South African economy. Now, I can tell you is that we are in very, very, very deep trouble in South Africa. And I can give you also reasons why. If you look at the fiscal accounts, for example, that's what the Minister of Finance is doing, and that is, it has become totally unsustainable. To put it differently, if you want to save the fiscal accounts, state spending needs to be cut by at least 6% in the next fiscal year. And if you cut state spending by 6% in the next fiscal year, just before an election, that is politically very difficult to do. Alternatively, what you can do, you have to increase certain taxes and expect a number of tax increases, but the only tax that can really make a significant difference is an increase in VAT, value-added tax, which again, is politically very difficult to do. On the fiscal accounts, we are in very deep trouble. Expect things like, for example, eventually over time, foreign exchange regulations, wat ons al voorheen gehad het. Expect things like, for example, higher levels of inflation, and depending on whether the state will succeed in taking over the South African Reserve Bank, the politicians, they've tried recently, and we can expect very high levels of inflation, and things like, for example, prescribed assets and the like. So unless we get very, very strong political leadership that do a lot of unpopular things, the South African economy is going to go through a very difficult phase for a long time. Underlying economic growth at the moment is less than 1% or so. That will lead to an increase in unemployment, increase in poverty, an increase in social tension, and will create an environment for weird political ideas, which we're all seeing already in South Africa. So even if Cyril Ramaphosa takes over as president of the ANC, which I'm not necessarily sure it's going to happen, I'm afraid that even him won't have the necessary support to implement these changes. So this is waar ons are. This is waar ons is. That's where we are. That's where the South African economy is. But I'm here this morning to talk about money. Now, money is perhaps the most amazing invention ever. I can only think of one thing that comes close to money, and that is alcohol. But money and alcohol must be the most amazing inventions ever. Because just think about money. Money, in fact, is the root of everything that is good. So just think about this. If I didn't have money and I've got a cow and I want a chicken, how do I move from my cow to my chicken without money? I have to take my cow and I have to exchange it for 10 sheep, and then I have to exchange 1 sheep for 10 chickens, and I have 9 chickens I don't want and 9 sheep I don't want. The point is, it's a very expensive exercise to move from a cow to eventually get to a chicken. But with the introduction of money, we solve all sort of problems in the economy. And in fact, it is impossible to have something called the economy if we didn't have money. Because if we didn't have money, we will all have to do everything ourselves. You will have to produce your own chickens and your own sheep, and you have to fix your own electricity, fix the geyser, do everything, because we cannot specialize if we didn't have money. And so all the benefits of an economy won't exist without money. So money is the most amazing invention ever. It is important, money, because it makes it easier to move from a cow to a chicken. But very importantly, money reduces transaction costs. And as money evolved over time, and I'm going to touch a little bit on the evolution of money, but as money evolved over time, what happened is that the cost of transactions started coming down. And as the cost of transactions keep on coming down, people will transact more. That will lead to a better allocation of resources in the economy, and that will lead to a bigger economy and more wealth creation. And we have been exceptionally successful in creating wealth the last 100 or 150 years. Let me give you one number. 150 years ago, more than 90% of the world's population lived in poverty, in abject poverty. Today it is less than 10%. And it is, I would argue, primarily because of money. But what is money? And it sounds easy to understand. Everybody knows what money is. But the definition for money is anything that is generally accepted as money. Enigiets kan geld wees. Solank ons almal dit aanvaar as geld. Now, money evolved over time. We started off with things like, for example, shells. Or we used these little ostrich eggs with little holes in. That was considered to be money. We use cattle as money at the stage. Slaves we used as money. We use pieces of metal as money at certain stages. And we use gold, and silver became quite popular as money. And then we start putting these gold and silver nuggets in the vaults of the goldsmiths, and they will give us a piece of paper called an IOU. and that was the beginning of notes. So you didn't have to walk around with a very heavy pocket full of gold. You can simply put your notes in there. And that was the beginning of money. And it evolved into what we have today, electronic money, or digital money. We all use digital money on your credit card, as an example. But the important point is, every time we move to a new kind of money, transaction costs came down, leading to more economic activity, and that, of course, supported economic growth. A recent history of money, if you go back, say, 100 years or so, most monies were privately created. Most banks were allowed to make their own money, quite literally. There were some exceptions. For example, central banks are relatively new inventions. Most central banks only were created after the Second World War. The South African central bank is also less than 100 years old. But before that, most banks were allowed, literally, to make their own money. But we know politicians always, when something works, they want to take over. They want to misuse this. And that's exactly what happened. And one very good example is how was the Central Bank of France created? And the Central Bank of France was created when Napoleon gave a specific bank the right, literally, to make money, to the exception of all other banks. So it became a monopoly. And most central banks in the world are statutory monopolies. Only central banks are allowed to make money. I know some people take money, put it in a photocopy machine, make a couple of rands, but that's illegal. But central banks can do that. So initially we had private money, then it became centralized money by central banks making all this money, and they also initially had this money backed by gold. So if you take your money to the central bank, you can exchange that for gold, and that was called the gold standard. In 1971, we stepped off the gold standard, and that was Richard Nixon. He decided, no, we're not going to use the gold standard anymore. And from then on, money was created out of nothing. So central banks can literally make money out of nothing. It is called fiat money. The word fiat means let there be. So let there be money, and there's money. In all instances, without exception, in the history of mankind, whenever politicians lay their hands and take control over money, they reduce the value of money. One example is the South African rand. From 1970 to today, the South African rand has lost more than 99% of its value. Without exception, politicians always erode the value of money. Okay, so that's a recent history of money. How does a modern monetary system work? The South African Reserve Bank, let me use that as an example, will print 100 rand. It will cost them a few cents to print 100 rand. And they will print this 100 rand and they will sell it to a bank for 100 rand. And the South African Reserve Bank will sell it, and they will get in return an instrument in which the Reserve Bank earns interest. So that's the income of the South African Reserve Bank. They sell something, a piece of paper for 100 rand, and they make money out of that. So clearly, there's a lot of money to be made out of making money. Okay. And they make a lot of profits out of this, the South African Reserve Bank, and that is eventually paid over to the government in the form of various taxes. So the bank will receive this 100 rand, and that first 100 rand that the central bank puts into the system is called high-powered money or base money. So the bank will take this money, lend it out to somebody who will spend it somewhere in the economy and come and redeposit it back in the economy, in the bank. So the bank will have the 100 rand back again and lend it out to somebody else, spend it again, and somebody else will come and make a deposit back to the bank. So this 100 rand is lent, spent, and redeposited many times in the economy. And every depositor thinks he's got 100 rand in the bank. But in fact, if you go to the bank and we all ask deposits back, we won't have enough money because there's only 100 rand. And that process is called money creation. So what happens is that central bank knows this, so they say banks are not allowed to lend out all their 100 rands. They have to keep a fraction back as the reserve in case people come ask back their deposits. But still, even today, if we go to the banks, there simply is not enough money to ask for our money back. That's called the money creation process. And it's also called a fractional reserve system. Now, I'm going to explain the blockchain the way I understand that, and I'm going to do a little bit of an experiment this morning. Let us create our own money. In order to create our own money, and in order to make use of this new technology, the blockchain, and remember, I'm not very clever. So I use it in a very simple way, the way I understand it. This new technology called the blockchain is nothing but a network of people. And we all belong to this network. So here's the experiment. Let's create our own money this morning. In fact, you have all participated in private money many times before. So before I get to that, I just want to get some terminologies sorted out. The first terminology, what is important about money is that you get physical money, that is a note. Then you get digitized money. The physical money can either be government money, like central bank money, or it can be private money. And there are many examples of private notes as well. Gift vouchers at CNA or Woolworths is nothing but private physical money. This money can be digitized or put on a computer somewhere in electronic form. And this money can be encrypted to scramble it. Nobody can read what's going on there unless you have the specific password. And then a terminology that's quite often used is a virtual money. Virtual money is not money. Virtual money is like this game Monopoly, where it is pretend money. Virtual money can be physical, like the game Monopoly, or it can be digital. The kids play games on the internet, and they get all these coins, and they can buy a life or whatever, sword or whatever. That's not real money. So virtual money isn't money. So let's create our own money, and let's use the following experiment. Remember, we are a network. We all can see what everybody else is doing. And I suggest the following. From now on, we will all create our own money, and we call it the Atterbury Rand, as an example. So we all come together, and we print a lot of notes, and we decide we're going to use this as money. If you go to the school fair, as an example, you pay 100 Rand at the entrance, and you get these little pink slips. And you use these pink slips to buy popcorn and spring wheelies and things like that. That is private money. So we're going to do exactly the same. So we print these little notes, we call it Atterbury Rands, and we will all come and buy Atterbury Rands from me. So I get a guard, he will look after the lot of the rands, and we put the rands there, and we will all have our Atterbury Rands. So there's the actual rands, and we're using our own notes amongst each other. And it's all fine, good and well. Now, we can do a couple of things with these rands that we are using, our own rands. We can, for example, decide to digitize it, to create an application on the phone. So you come and you give us 100 Rand, we put it there for everybody to see, but instead of giving you a rand, an Atterbury Rand, we give you a digital Atterbury Rand on your cell phone. So nothing happens. But a few things can happen from here onwards. What if this heap of rands over here, we decide to sell this heap of rands and buy gold? Now our Atterbury Rands are backed by gold. And that's exactly what we had before 1971 when the world was on the gold standard. But what if we take this heap of gold now and we sell the heap of gold and we use this money to put in new carpets in this hall? So there's no more rands there, no more gold there. What is going to happen to the value of our Atterbury Rand? And the answer is, I don't really know. Because that is exactly what the rand is, or what the dollar is, or what the yen is, or the euro is. Because all those currencies are made out of nothing, and there's only one thing that supports their value, and that is trust. Nothing else. So if you create a private money, like I've just explained, and people trust it, then that money can potentially rival any other kind of money. And I can give you many examples where government monies couldn't be trusted. One example is what happened 10 years ago in Zimbabwe. Nobody trusted that money, and they've destroyed their own money. But there are a couple of things. Once we've digitized our money, now it's on a cell phone. What does it mean to have a digital application with your money. Instead of having it in a physical form, now we have it on an application on your cell phone, on your smartphone, for example. If you use normal money, government money, it is impossible for anybody to make a deposit directly in somebody else's bank account. Because if I want to make a deposit in your bank account, I have to give my bank an instruction to give your bank an instruction to make a deposit into your bank account. The point is, I will always make use of a financial intermediary if I make use of digital government money or central bank money. The moment it is cash, physical cash, I can give it to you directly. But the moment it is digital, I must go through a financial intermediary. Governments do not like cash. And the reason why they don't like cash is because we can do all sort of illegal things. Like buy omkyktwak of aapkwak om die hoek. Cash is also very easy and it's quite often used to evade taxes. But the moment you go through the banking system, there is a record. And the Minister of Finance can go and check your record and say, where did you get this money? Did you pay tax on that? If I have private money that is digitized, I can do a transaction from one individual to the other individual at a low transaction cost as well, without going via a financial intermediary. What are the implications? The implications are, nou laat ek 'n paar voorspellings maak. Let me make a few predictions. The implications are that if I can transfer money directly from one individual to the other one in a digital form without going through a financial intermediary like a bank, I am probably going to stop using banks. So I predict we are at the beginning of a revolution, and the result of that may even be that banks will completely disappear. Completely disappear. And remember, if you don't have banks, why do you need monetary policy? And if you don't have monetary policy, then you're with central banks, then you don't have interest rate policies and the like. But that is not all. So the Minister of Finance knows that I'm not using rands, normal rands anymore. I'm using Atterbury rands, a money that we've just created amongst ourselves now. We all accept that. We trust the guy that's in charge of this money creation process, and we're all using Atterbury rands. And the Minister of Finance realizes all of a sudden that he needs to change the way he taxes us. Because 95% of all taxes are financial transaction taxes. So he will come to me and say, listen, I notice you haven't been paying taxes for some time. You need to pay taxes now. Give me your phone, I want to see how much money you've got. How many Atterbury rands you have in your system, on your phone. What will my reply be? I've forgotten my password. Ek het my password vergeet, Minister van Finansies. So that means the tax system is likely to change quite dramatically over time as well. So taxes are likely to be focused on things like physical things, like property, physical things, property, houses, cars, and things like that, and on heads, like poll taxes and toll roads and the like. And the result of that is probably less taxes to the Minister of Finance. The result of that is probably smaller governments in future, and the result of that, of course, will be the more importance of things like, for example, local communities. But that's not the only consequences of this new technology. There are a couple of other things that is likely to happen as well. Remember, now that we can transact directly with each other, certain other institutions are likely to disappear as well. The JSE, the aandelebeheers, all shares can simply be put on the blockchain as well. What about insurers? Do I need to take out insurance? No. All I need to go to all of you and say, let us all pool our money together. If something should happen to me, I can simply use you as my insurer, the way that everybody else use everybody else as an insurer. I predict also that certain jobs will completely disappear. The job of the transport lawyers, as an example. Property will probably be put on the blockchain as well. So those kind of jobs are likely to disappear as well. But the most important thing of all of this is that what has happened the last 100 years or so is that we've got a new Uber class, a new ruling class. They are the professional politicians and the career bureaucrats. And they have been interfering in our lives every day with more and more laws and more taxes, interfering and making our lives more and more difficult. This is an opportunity for us to get rid of this new Uber class. And we can take the power back and move power where it's supposed to be. And that's in the hands of you and of me. And technology will make that possible. Now, there are many examples where these sort of things are already happening. In my company where we are, we're in the process of creating certain financial products. We're busy creating some products where we will make it possible for people, anybody that wanted to participate. There's the different risk profiles. If you want to participate in things like, for example, Bitcoin or any other currency, there are many of these different currencies. We would like to create an opportunity for people to participate in that as well. In fact, we're also in the process of trying to create an investment product where you have an underlying some sort of asset, like a share, for example, and on top of that, you put something, a currency that is traded on the blockchain. And the implication for that, the tax question, for example, is, if I have a currency, a coin trading on a blockchain, for example, with an underlying asset, I will do all my trading on the blockchain, totally anonymous, and the Minister of Finance won't know about that. Of course, we will all volunteer to pay our taxes. There's no doubt about that. But taxing people will become significantly more difficult in future than what it is already. Maybe just a last comment. You have to be very careful. This is, like I've said, not an investment. It is certainly a wonderful a speculative opportunity. But the exciting part is not the money-making opportunity. The real exciting part is the technology and how this technology is going to change our future. We've got this idea of a community. A community is, for example, a country with certain laws and central banks and governments and all that. Those communities will look different in future. And communities in future will probably take the form of, and you're already part of that, things like, for example, a WhatsApp community, a Facebook community. And that's probably the future. And of course, there will be a lot of dangers, but I prefer a world with a lot of danger and a lot of freedom than a world with little danger and little freedom. Dankie dat julle na my geluister het.